When we think of underdog stories in Formula One history, we tend to think of recent examples, such as Kevin Magnussen's pole position at the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix, or maybe Esteban Ocon or Pierre Gasly's surprise wins in midfield machinery. Many drivers and teams have overcome adversity to achieve incredible results in times before most F1 fans were even alive. Giancarlo Fisichella won the 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix in a car that eventually finished 9th in the Constructors' Championship, with the team only scoring 3 points that season outside of their miraculous win. However, what if, instead of us talking about races where the underdog had lots of luck, with certain circumstances falling perfectly in line with their strategies, we talk about an underdog story where they were in a high position on pure merit? This is the story of the 1990 French Grand Prix, where the Leyton House team shocked everyone in the Formula One paddock to achieve an unexpected result. Going into 1990, Leyton House were feeling optimistic as they had rebranded the March team following acquisition by the Japanese real estate tycoon Akira Akagi. Before the takeover, March had been a stalwart of Formula One since its first season in 1970, as they had supplied customer cars to several teams, including Tyrrell, Williams, Hesketh and several other small teams and privateers. For those unaware of this concept, up until the late 2000s, teams were allowed to sell their cars and intellectual property to other teams. For example, when Toro Rosso, now AlphaTauri, joined Formula One, their parent team, Red Bull, supplied them with their cars, the only difference between the Red Bull cars and the Toro Rosso cars being the name. Otherwise, they were identical. This is the same strategy that March applied. They sold their cars to teams and privateers being drivers who entered races in their own personal race car, not driving for any specific team, and that's how they made their money. Following a drop-off in customer cars in Formula One by the late 70s, March left the sport after 1977, then diverted their attention to Formula 2 and IndyCar. And after success in both categories, they came back to Formula One in 1987 with Leyton House as their title sponsor. After a few seasons of relative uncompetitiveness, March was sold completely to Leyton House in late 1989, and it was rebranded to Leyton House Racing. Although the team had undergone a rebrand, they retained many of their key staff, including up-and-coming designer Adrian Newey. They also retained the driver lineup from the previous year, that of Ivan Capelli and Mauricio Gugelmin. The previous season, they had only scored 4 points, achieving only 12th in the Constructors' Championship, and their first season as Leyton House didn't start much better. They only qualified both cars for a race twice in the first 6 races of the season, only getting a best result of 10th in Canada. The team arrived at France for the 7th round of the season, having just come off the back of a double did not qualify at the race before in Mexico. The iteration of the Paul Ricard circuit used in 1990 is quite different from the one used today. Following the death of Elio De Angelis in 1986 after a crash at the Verrières S, the precursor to the modern Turn 1, Formula One chose to race on the short club layout of the circuit, bypassing the entire first sector of the modern circuit by turning hard right just before the first corner, rejoining the circuit halfway down the Mistral Straight on the way down to Signes Corner, also bypassing the chicane that is used on the modern layout. This meant that overtaking would be very difficult, even for faster cars approaching slower cars. Going into the weekend, Leyton House were optimistic on their performances improving because they had found a fault in their wind tunnel, which had meant that the numbers it was putting out were incorrect, which further meant that the car they had designed was aerodynamically inefficient. This fault was fixed, and France will be the first round they were contesting without an aerodynamically faulted car. After their previous record that season, any result would be extraordinary. In qualifying on Saturday, Capelli got 7th place, with Gugelmin finishing the second session in 10th place. The team had had a remarkable turnaround, going from failing to qualify to having both cars qualify in the top 10. In the race, they were hoping to consolidate their position and maybe even scrape it to the points, if they were lucky. Going into the race, it was a hot, sunny day. That year, there was a heat wave that went all across Europe, causing temperatures to skyrocket. Many teams were looking to pit for tyres during the race due to potential tyre overheating, although this wasn't a guarantee, considering the fact that there were no rules regarding how many pit stops you had to make during a race at that time. Many teams were worried about tyre safety going through the fearsome Signes corner, the fast right-hander at the end of the Mistral Straight, as this corner would put the tyres under immense loads. However, despite this, the Leyton House team had the idea to run the race on a no-stop strategy, setting up the car to have more grip in the right-hand corners, meaning they would have less problems taking the more difficult corners on the circuit. On starting the race, the leading Ferraris, McLarens and Williams streaked away from the rest of the pack led by Gerhard Berger, and following the leaders' pit stops, coming between laps 28 to 32 of the 80-lap race, Capelli and Gugelmin found themselves in a 1-2 position. Although it was a nice surprise to see an underdog team in such a lofty position, everyone watching the race thought they would lose the lead as soon as they pitted, or when the leaders caught up to them, whichever came first. However, due to the short, technical nature of the Paul Ricard circuit, the leaders behind couldn't overtake, and they had to sit in a train behind the two blue cars. It stayed like this for many laps, with Capelli and Gugelmin undeterred until lap 54, when Prost eventually got past Gugelmin. Gugelmin then suffered an engine failure on lap 57, which saw the chance of a double points finish for the Leyton House team go away. As the next 20 laps played out, it seemed as if Leyton House were going to beat the odds and make the big teams look stupid. However, it wasn't to be. On lap 77, with just 3 laps remaining, Capelli's car suffered an engine issue, meaning any morsel of defence the car had left before had now disappeared. Prost overtook Capelli on that lap and pulled an 8-second gap in the last 3 laps, but Capelli nonetheless dragged his car, kicking and screaming, across the line in second place. Despite the loss of a potential win, the team and Capelli were ecstatic about the result. Everybody was happy to see an underdog prove themselves against the establishment, regardless of whether they were in the Leyton House team itself. What was not known at the time was that this result would be the last time that both Capelli and the Leyton House team itself would stand on the podium. After this result, the team would slowly decline before falling off a cliff into obscurity. The next outings in the remainder of the 1990 season saw the team regularly run in the top 8, but as per the point system at this time, only the 6th place that Capelli achieved in Belgium would get them any constructors' points. As the on-track results declined towards the season's end, the off-track situation was even worse. One of their key staff, Ian Phillips, fell ill with meningitis, while the team's financial situation was falling into further disarray, with team owner Akagi constantly reducing the team's budget. He brought in an accountant to help quell the issues, but then this accountant then took charge of the whole team following Phillips' issues. Their star designer Adrian Newey, then fell out with the accountant-turned-boss, which pushed Newey away from the team and over to Williams for the following season. When Ian Phillips returned, it was announced he would leave the team for Jordan in 1991. These team losses set in motion a major reshuffle, which saw Newey replaced as designer by ex-Ferrari man Gustav Brunner. Many engineers that were first brought from the team's previous guys as March also left the team as well. The team's 2 points finishers in France and Spa that season got them 6th in the constructors' standings, following the disqualification of Larousse for using another manufacturer's chassis. 1991 was a bleak year, as despite the car's pace being somewhat decent, actually running in the points positions numerous times, lead driver Capelli failed to finish any of the first 9 races of the season, while Gugelmin finished 2 races, getting a 7th and a 12th in Magny-Cours and Imola respectively. Capelli scored the team's only point that season with a 6th place in the 10th round in Hungary, before the team got 4 more top 10 finishes in the last 5 races of the season, but sadly yielding no points. By the end of the season, team owner Akagi had been arrested, and the team was falling apart at the seams, with Capelli and Gugelmin departing the team to Ferrari and Jordan, respectively, for the following season. Karl Wendlinger, a Mercedes works driver, replaced Capelli for the last 2 races, retiring in the first and getting 20th place in the second. Following Akagi's arrest, the team was sold to a consortium including staff member Brunner and many businessmen, renaming the team to March to distance themselves from Akagi and his company's reputation. The team struggled on in 1992 before folding in early 1993 before the season began. Team founder Akira Akagi died in August 2018 at the age of 73. He forged a legacy of a brilliant underdog. Even if the team was only around for 2 seasons, it achieved so much more in those 2 seasons than many other teams have achieved in much longer periods. The team's sharp decline doesn't take anything away from its peak. It showed that on the right day, with the right team, on the right track, anything is possible in Formula 1, and this is the reason why we watch the sport. Anyway, that's all for today, everyone. Leave a comment below. Who is your favourite underdog in Formula 1, and who would you like to see do well in the future? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all later. Bye.